Uh, I am Andy Schmidt-Anders. I'm the director here at Kaufman Museum, and we're thrilled to have such a nice crowd this afternoon. Glad you could all come out for a Saturday afternoon program at the museum. Now, before we start our program, I would like to make a few announcements. And tomorrow at 3, we will reconvene in this same spot. And that will be programmed by Dr. Mary Dusenbury. And she is a research affiliate at the Spencer Museum of Art in Lawrence. And she will present wool and silk. And that is the last program associated with our current special exhibition, Reeds and Wool, which you're welcome to look at today. And one reason it's the last program is that next week, Sunday, is the last day Reeds and Wool will be up. So we hope you'll have a chance this week or next to look at it again or to look at it for the first time. Another reason that Reeds and Wool is coming down is that Uncle Carl's camp will be starting in about 2 weeks. So if you know of folks 18 and under that would like to spend time at Kaufman Museum, in a summer camp this summer, please stop to get a brochure at the front desk, or you can go online to learn more about our summer camps. So we encourage you to do that.
What am I older, but I want to do pottery?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Nathan, being up in the back. That's right. We have just opened up our pottery camp to anyone of any age down to 7th grade. So 7th grade and above are welcome to attend our pottery class. There will be time making handmade pieces with slabs of clay, other kinds of techniques, but then also some time spent at the Bevel College ceramic slabs. So we'd encourage everybody to sign up for that. We'd love to have you come for pottery possibilities. And with that, I am going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Mark Jansen, and he will be introducing our special guest.
Thank you, Andy. I'm just add my appreciation for everyone being here. This is a very exciting exhibit for me. I teach European and Mennonite history here at Bevel College. And so I want to introduce a little bit about the exhibit and also about Bernhard Thiessen, the presenter. I feel a little strange because part of what you're seeing in the exhibit is connected to my own history. So I feel like a historical exhibit now in some ways. It's weird. When I was young, I studied in East Berlin while it was still communist, the last year of its existence, and then stayed a couple more years. And I related to the Mennonite church there. And so I know some of the people in these pictures and some of their stories. But Bernhard Thiessen has found out much more, and it covers a much longer span of time. He grew up in South Germany, and then his first career, I guess, was in radio journalism and in Christian radio, and then he shifted fairly quickly into the pastorate, so he's a Mennonite pastor. He did pastoral work with youth in northern Germany, and then he was pastor at the Berlin Mennonite Church after the wall came down, but while Alice and I and our oldest 2 children were doing dissertation work. So that's the first time we met. That has been over 20 years ago. And we've stayed in touch. And then he moved to Hamburg and pastored the larger Hamburg Mennonite Church for a good many years. And then as a retirement project, he decided to work on history. And so he's working on his dissertation on the history of Mennonites in East Germany at the Free University Theology Department in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And his supervisor is also a theologian, Fernando Ants, and the supervisor said, well, you probably need a historian to help you out because you're in the theology department, but you're doing a lot of history. So he asked me to be on his dissertation committee. So I'm also, in that sense, his supervisor, which is also very strange. But it's great to have a grad student and above all, a very good friend. So I'm just excited to introduce Bernhard Thiessen, where we talked about the Mennonites in East Germany. Welcome.
And thank you, Mr. Here at the Scotland Museum, for the possibility that I can bring my things. I was going on a plane, and so I just can bring what I can carry. And the exhibition only, is a little bigger, but it's not such big as it is here, because the main thing, Jim Yoda, where are you? Sitting here somewhere. Oh, here. He brought the best part of my exhibition. You've seen it outside. The eye picture, the green frogs on PDR. It's great. It's amazing. Thank you very much. And thank you, Andy, and especially also Dave. He's now in holidays, but he really, sometimes I said he helped us, but it was the other opposite. We helped him to build up my exhibition here. And he is a great conductor here of all these things. Thank you very much. But Dave Kreider, he is responsible for all these exhibitions here. Yeah, that's the start, the beginning. First, maybe some words on the exhibition, and then I go starting with my PowerPoint. Is it just the 40 minutes when I talk about the exhibition, or is it still running? Andy wants to look at time. Just a few information. This is the exhibition. The title is over here. And it's about the first beginning of the help from MCC in Berlin for the refugees after World War II. And this is the part you see from my side was in the left corner. And we just found out when we built up the exhibition, and Mark and they said, oh, well, our names are written on this wheat sacks, on these flour sacks. And you have to look at that later. They are all names from the region down here. So you send it, moved from your parents in the 1940s, 1950s, send it to Germany, send it to Berlin, and then the people get it. And I got one of the sack. 4 years ago, a man brought it back to me and said, my parents got it in the 50s, and it comes here from, I think that's this area. And so I bring it back here. Isn't that crazy? And I never rode in a trolley, and then I come here. This is kind of crazy convention. Of the area now. Yeah, when we decided or thought about what kind of thing we should talk about, then I said, we don't talk about the exhibition, but because you can see it, we talk about a very special theme about a Mennonite peace efforts under communist occupation. I will tell some historical things with a PowerPoint. I will stand here, then I can also meet with you. And you see down there, these are the universities I'm doing my research. Amsterdam, I think, and this other is a project. It takes a lot more. It's an exhibition, it's a film, it's a book, and now it's a PhD program. And today we talk about a little bit about Mennonite Central Poverty, and this is the sign for the secret police in East Germany. This Ministerium für Staatssicherheit, and the short is called Stasi. Staatssicherheit, Stasi. This is the name. We start first that you know about what kind of people we talk. This is a map from the occupied zones in Germany. We talk about the end of the Second World War. Maybe I just show you. This is West Prussia and East Prussia. A lot of Mennonites live there. And they all had to flee from the Red Army. This became Polish, was also German port. And this part becomes the Soviet-occupied zone, where also nearly 2,000 Mennonites lived in this area. And this became later the so-called DDR, German Democratic Republic, or in German is Deutsche Demokratische Republik. DDR, we say, and in English it's DDRs. And this is the area I talk about. And in the middle of that, it's Berlin. the divided city. It was first all Russian, but then they sit down and talk, and then they said, we have to divide the capital in 4 pieces: French, British, American, US American, and Russian. And so this is a very special situation. You see it here a little bit more. The flags, Berlin. And this is what we're mostly talking about when we talk about today. Around 2,800 Mennonites flee from this, mostly 10 or 12,000 who live in that area in Western East Prussia. They flee to this area where we became Soviet occupied zone. It was winter time. They were very poor and don't have any place to live, so they need a lot of help. First, they were settled in the part they called the Soviet occupied zone as a settler. They don't call them refugees. The refugees that we mean that the Russian army made them into refugees. So this was not allowed in the GDR. So they call them resettlers. And then they called the farmers, they were called new farmers, and the citizens were called new citizens. But they have a very program in the GDR that means Land in Bauernland. That means aristocratic owners, we have to take away their own things and give it to the farmers. This was the program, Hand in Bauernland. Not the big owners of 9,000 of hectares or even 100 acres, but only a small. And you see, it's very small at that time. 5 families were living in this house, and the family Duty was one of them. And they had a big farm in West Prussia, but now they have 5 families in this house and a little bit around, and the rest they had to work for the LTG, the Landwirtschaft, which is Produktionsgenossenschaft. They put it together in a kind of a society. Everybody has to work together, and for the whole people. And as you know, maybe some of you are farmers or come from a farm. A good farmer is a bad, maybe even the higher the hand. No, they don't want to get orders. They don't want. And so the Mennonites were not a good second, how do you call it, hired hand or children or something like that. They don't like that. And therefore, a lot of them went over the so-called green border. It was possible at the end of the 40s and the beginning of the 50s, it was possible to cross the border. It was not easy, but it was possible. And until 1961, it was possible. Not over the green border between Germany and the GDR, but in Berlin. There were the sectors. And so they can come from the German Democratic Republic, the East Zone, and go in Berlin in the East sector. And from the East sector in Berlin, they can go to the West sector. It was pocket. And then when they wrote this paper, this is a paper every refugee in Berlin has to go. And there were different stations, places where they have to use. First, the doctrine. Are you where do you come from? Then you see the secret services. They have all secret services we have in Berlin. The British, the French, the American, the CIA, everything were in this emergency we set to down. We call it just a camp where the refugees first have to go in before they can go in the city. And so they meet all these places there, and need their stamps, and then they can go out if they were accepted as a political refugee. Only 30% of all of the refugees from the GDR were accepted as political refugees. That means 70% were without paper from the western part of Berlin. They stayed there. They tried to work. They tried to live. They got less support from the state because they were not accepted. And those who were accepted, they can get a ticket for an airplane and go fly out to the west. It was paid by the state. And so there can be the voting. And we have all these secret services there. It was the place where the most secret services are in Europe. It was in this little camp in Berlin. We know now because we have now the documents. And there were also the Stasi, the secret service from East Germany. It wasn't allowed, but they were everywhere, and they were all there. And tried to get the refugees back, or maybe Stefan as a Stasi informer in the West, they tried to get in contact with all these refugees. It was also very, very hard opening. This is the situation. Now we talk about the Stasi, the secret service from the GDR. It was founded in 1950. The GDR was founded in 1949. That means in October. It means just a few months later, they founded this secret service. First, it was called the Geheime Volkspolizei. It was just the police, state police, and they had this slide also in the police. But then it comes to the Ministry of State Security, that means Ministerien für Staatssicherheit, legally. In 1989, the Stasi employed 91,000 main officers. 91,000. And the specialty of the Stasi was the informal collaborators for the informelle Mitarbeiter, we taught it in German, And this was it's quite normal that you don't know the number because they were undercover. And you don't know if it's the neighbor or the teacher or who is it. But one is around 150,000. Some said 180,000, some said 120,000, maybe 150,000 of the whole population was working for the Stasi in 1989. And you will have to imagine this was only 18 million people, the whole population. And you have nearly 250,000 people working for the secret police. That means you don't know who you talk about. It was also the situation, don't talk in your living room about private things. Only in the kitchen maybe or in the bed, but not in a space. You don't know if the uncle or neighbor or some family who worked for a little son. It was a very troubling level situation. Okay, now this is the background, and now I have 4 different times I would like to talk to you. First is the 1950s, early 1950s. There was an minister for inner affairs. He wants to forbid the Mennonites. I tell you why. That the Mennonites tried in the peace, it was an MCC word, the peace word. They tried to get in contact with the people on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and they also have to contact with the Stasi informal Mitarbeiter, informal collaborators. Then I have a special thing. It's a situation of Vietnam, the war in 1968 until 1974 in this area. We also, as Mennonites, try to help in North Vietnam with the help of the GDR, and you know there's also the Stasi involved. And the latest part, it's the 1980s. There was a pastor in the GDR, in the Mennonite congregation in the GDR, and now we know he comes from the Stasi. He was prepared from the Stasi to go to the Mennonites and do their path. I tell you about the story. Okay, now we'll go back to the first part in the beginning of the 1950s, when the people want to leave the GDR over the so-called green border, just going through the forest and try to get on the other side. And this is, I know this man here, the little boy, he's now a man, in his family. He was here in this picture, sitting in a horse, and they are really were lacking to be on great size. And then the British officers said, be quiet, said the Russians, you're basically here, I can't see anything to you. And they were so happy to be in the people still forest, both sides. And so this was one family by cities. And the Mennonites in Berlin, they dealt with the help of the U.S. Army. They got a villa in Berlin, 1946. We have also the pictures on the exhibition. That means the U.S. Army helped the Mennonites, the MCC, to work for the refugees and the Stasi money bank. They know that the U.S. Army is in the back of the Mennonites. And this is always an argument against the Mennonites. Very good with the enemy. And the next point is that the MCC helped the Mennonites, the refugees, to come in the West and go to the camp in war, and then maybe go down to Paraguay, Uruguay, and maybe also Canada and some this is the MCC helped them. And therefore, they were also enemies of the state of the GBR because the GBR said it's not allowed to leave our country. So, and this is another picture from that time in 1951. It's the two families. The family is called Hein, and the other family is called Gao. And they were in nearly 18 people. And they every Sunday afternoon, they made a little Sunday tour, the horses and the wagons. And one Sunday, they didn't come back. They just tried to figure out how it works, how it goes where. And you see maybe an old building. No? One is on. So in the front, you see a little picture, and in the back, over 2 bicycles. They have the kind of Korea. They just know what the situation is. Bicycle in front, bicycle in the back. And then in the middle, there were the horses, 4 horses, and the wagons. And Bernhard is one of his grandfathers sitting on here. And she told me there were police coming, and they said, "Oh, that's a specific animal German." And he just checked the papers, looked at the people, and went away. And everybody knew that he will be the Godstone, and that nobody talked about that. And so they come to the West. But later, we heard from a spy. He was in a sermon, in the Mennonite sermon, and he listened to bullet to his chief. And there, you maybe some 10 year lead mark. Oh, no, be the year of my life. I'm going to ask him all the time when English is reading.
The financing of the border crossing is provided by a pastor from America who is so supported by a believer of the sect, who is the owner of a knife factory in America. The money from these 2 persons would only be spent for the crossing, and each member would have to work over their first 1 year in agriculture, for which there is no payment.
That's what the spy sent to his the chief inspector. Now, we are always thinking about who is that knife factory owner. If you have an imagine can that be, then please tell me. The Snart said maybe it was already in Liver. He has a shoe factory. And it makes up knife and shoe. Maybe if you have an idea who that can be, then tell me. You must be a pastor also, no, and supporter. It's a pastor and a supporter. Okay, we find out. But sometimes that shows also not everything what the spies write down were true. And you have really looked very exact what it means. Sometimes they want to be bigger than they are and write big stories. And sometimes they really don't know who are the Mennonites. We have one file I had in the archives, and was written this sect of the last 3 days of Jesus in it, and Americans going and give them presents when they tell the stories and go to the land. It's who is that the last 3 days of Jesus? I think they mixed it up over the 7 days, and the Lions and the Mennonites and all together. But because we have to think about that tree, so more anything about churches. It was an atheistic state. It was not that it is meant to know about churches. And so we have some information from them. But this was the report. That was the beginning of the trying to ban the Mennonites, trying to put it down in the PR. Just minutes of Rena there, it was Karl Schweinhauer, and he said they have to get this down because they are controlled by Anglo-American warmongers. That means U.S. Army. I told you the army helped the Mennonites to get houses, to get this is not one. It's just their interpretation. And MCC, this is also an American organization. And the next is the theory, depraved and decline the GDR, people of the neck holiday. It means all the evil elite of GDR are lost in the fabric in the forms everywhere to work. And therefore it's forbidden to leave the GDR because you have to work. That's not totally Chinese, but all. And then also they steal the people's property and values, horses, and the Mennonites modeling have very good horses and bicycles and cars and maybe something like that. That was an argument to the Mennonites that they don't go by foot, that they took horses even. And they don't help to build up a socialist society. They were against this socialist society, and therefore they had to do that. But it doesn't come to the edition of the Mennonites, and we don't know exactly why. I have some ideas, but the last link is missing. And here that was in February 1952, and this minister has lead this job in May 1952, but it's just a few months between. And so maybe then his follower was not interested in Mennonites, and so the project didn't go on. But it was we have the letter over there, and you can read this in German. But you can read that he wants to convert the Mennonites in this time. Second chapter. Then you know these guys, Martin Luther and John Falviola. Now we come to this peace thing. The Mennonites at the beginning, maybe you saw one earlier. The World Council of Churches was founded in 1948, 3 years after the war ends, in Amsterdam. They come together, they gather together, and they have a main message for the world that means war is contrary to the law of God. No more war. I wholly imagine the one you thought about in Ukraine and Russia. This was the church, the Orthodox Church, that war is contrary to the will of God. That they signed that. And in the law, so we are the historical peace churches, they said war, they said peace is the will of God. We are not only against the war, but we have also to create peace. You go with this example further on. To protect people, they have to go to war. They have to build peace, still up peace. This is what the peace churches are doing. And so there were a few conferences in the 1950s and 60s where they tried to get the peace churches get in contact with other churches to talk about how can we bring peace in the state, in the world, and in the train, in the colonies and everywhere. In the 1950s, there was a different situation than now. But therefore, they have these conferences, Puidoux Conferences. It sounds a little nice. It's a very small little town in Switzerland where they first meet, and therefore the whole conference is called the Puidoux Conference. The next ones were in England in 1957, when Bernhard in Bern, the Paris, 1960, and also in the Modest in Netherlands. These were the four so-called Puidoux Conferences here meet. And now, for me, for my research interest, is the 1960 conference in Liège in Paris. The theme was the meaning of the worship of Christ for our existence and state and society. That means really the political side of being a Christian. What does it mean for our countries? And so the Eastern countries were very interested in this thing. And we have a special friend here, and I always read a lot of things about him. Is Gerhard Bassarak. He was a theologian from East Germany. He was a student in Switzerland in the World Council of Churches. He was a Spaniard. He got a Spaniard. He learned there. And he also was a worker from the Stasi. So the Stasi gave him an announcement in 1960 for this conference in Liège, and they said the aim of this trip that they paid for this guy to come there to the conference, the aim of this trip is to obtain information about the ideas of these organizations in the churches and their leading personalities, and to establish contact with ecumenical societies. He was working for the World Council of Churches to make contacts, but also for the historical peace churches to try to get in contact with the people there. And he was, at that time, getting there and seeing that John Howard Yoder in Liège in 1960. And John Howard Yoder invited him to come to the second military academy in East Berlin. He was this Gerhard Bassarak was the leader of the academy. And he said, John Yoda, it's good to come to us and meet us. And we have a meeting in August 1961. And everybody we know is a little bit of history knows that this furnishing of August in Berlin, the date that started, he closed the wall. You see the police there, it's in the middle, they just put a wall, you folk Berlin, and the start on the 13th of August, and it takes 3 months till it was ready, but it was not the beginning. And in that time, Bernhard was in the 16th until 20th of August, he was in East Berlin. Just the solid people. And he was teaching there for the teachers. They're coming, the teachers there have a kind of a seminar workshops and so on. He told them about baptism, about Mennonites, about these things. And so he was living in the West Berlin in a hotel and crossing the border every day, going to East Berlin to teach, and in the evening he come back to Berlin. And in September of this year, 1961, he wrote a report to the MCC Peace section. And I found this report, and there he wrote the mark he got in national people. And
The situation there that week was by no means as tragic as the Western press made it seem. I crossed the border every day with absolutely no difficulty. In fact, the border guards were excessively polite. It seems quite clear that the West was interested in magnifying the importance of the crisis.
It sounds a little crazy for us because, you know, you wrote this report in September, and the first who was killed by trying to cross the river, the canal, and out in there, and he was shot because it was not allowed to be the GBI. And then a few days later, John Holiday went this in the C-section and said, the right thing. I don't know, we just discussed what does that mean? And we are not really sure what that means. And if I know more, I tell you. But in the first thing is, it's a kind of it's weird for us to get the right interpretation of this meaning from John Holiday. Fact is that with the help of this Gerhard Bassarak, worked on this youth report in 1965. This is the student room, 9 persons. In the back is Bonnie Miller, Uniform. He on the trip, but he organized the trip. And John Howard, where do you see the side people on the right? And some others were on this trip. And this Gerhard Bassarak, they invited them to go to East Berlin, and then they go on to the Czech Republic. And so it was a great trip, and I found in the documents of the Stasi, and they have the reports, but for the people, those who went on, they write a little report, police, and they always they gathered every thing, and but now, you know, this Professor Dr. Gerhard Bassarak, he was the first so-called secret informer, Geheiminformant, with the codename Freund, and later will change it, and it was a ball M with EM. Sometimes they also call EMN. That means the informer for the people to form with contact to the foreign countries, and means then from them the foreign country, foreign countries, Okay, that was our friend Gerhard Bassarak in contact with our son Holiday over the place the online theologian. Another thing is the MCC work in Vietnam. Maybe, yeah, at the beginning, MCC was very early working in Vietnam, South Vietnam. In 1924, it starts to take care of the poor people, of its refugees, of the big farmers and the poor people in the countryside. And before it becomes even more hot, even more strong. And in the 1966, time. I think it was President Johnson who put a little oil in the fire of this war and tried to win the war, and it was impossible at that time. We know it later. And then the Mennonites had a problem. They were in South Vietnam for the people in the hospital and enemies for those who need help. And the U.S. Army, they destroyed the villages at the frontier, made refugees, put them in the south of Vietnam, and then asked the Mennonites to take care of these refugees. And they said, "There's something wrong here. We don't want to be part of this war. We just have to another thing to do when we look in our Bible, that we have to take care of the enemies, loving the enemies." And then they started to say, we have also to have contact to the enemy, to the northern Vietnam. But it was not so easy. The government, the U.S. Army said, so if you do that, you are
Traitors. Yeah, traitors.
you work with the enemy, and that and kill you for that, because it's against in our war, that working for the wrong side. But the Mennonite said, when I look in the Bible, I know what we have to do. And this was the enemies and working for the enemies. And so they tried to get in contact with them. And I think Beach, in some of the name, he was a very informed man, and he would time a year in Vietnam, and has a very good heart, open heart, despite sort of enemies people. And so he made a secret mission just to get in contact in Paris, in Algiers, in Gabon, and also in East Berlin, to all those countries who have contact to the North Vietnam government. And so he also came to this. It's a bad picture, I know, but it's from a film in 1965, and there are not so many pictures from this man. It's Dr. Herbert Langmans. He was a doctor in the east part of Berlin. He was a specialist on tuberculosis. He was also working a lot in northern Vietnam, building up hospitals and working there, and has also this sign good worker for friendship in North Vietnam. So he always that is quality, how he installed the level. Just they gave it because he has such good contacts here, and he was he met this Adrivici, and Adrivici wrote in his secret reports to MCC. Oh, now I have my connection marked. It is too early to evaluate how significant this channel might be with other contacts. But I am inclined to believe that Dr. Lunchman is an important figure in the fabric of power structure related to the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and that he is in a position to interpret our purposes to people in responsible positions. That means that MCC was searching for people who have power to do something. That's quite normal. If you want to do something, you need a man or woman who are able to do something. And so they got this contact to this other government. They just, the Mennonite World Conference was taking place in 1967 in Amsterdam. And the last election of the big service at the end was called Vietnam. And they gave it, I think, nearly $6,000 they collected at them. And they said, we want to help in Vietnam. And they would put the whole money from northern Vietnam things. And therefore they can't give it to MCC US. So they have it to MCC Canada. But they were not involved in this war. And so this money went from Amsterdam to Canada, and from Canada to Berlin, because we have this contact to this Dr. Landman, and he made it possible that we can send medical things, instruments, all kind of injections, and some what is needed in Vietnam was possible to brought to the northern Vietnam to the help of Dr. Landman. That means IMO was an organization, international Mennonite organization in Europe, together with MCC and the European Mennonites. They worked together, and then they bought these medical things. They brought it with a train to Berlin, transit, And in Berlin, there was a couple called Marion and John Thiessen. They were in the pastor there in the West. They go with a VW bus from MCC, took this stuff, brought it to the border in Berlin, and on the other side of the border, there was Dr. Wankman and his friends, and they took it, they put it in a train, brought it to Poland. In Poland, it comes on a ship, and the ship goes directly to North Vietnam. That was the idea. And we didn't know if that worked until I went in the archive and then I found this narrative. This narrative shows that this material blew from North Vietnam because there's a doctor there, Dr. Dan, and he took this and sent a telegram to East Berlin to his friend, Dr. Wankman, and he was also thankful for John Casey. You see, acknowledged the seeds of their blood. People spraying many things to John Thiessen and Albert. Albert is Dr. Wankman. And this is his guy from North Vietnam. That means it was possible to send 4 medical transfer patients from the European or some American background to North Vietnam for MD something. That means MCD has reached but it was their job to say they want to help the enemies. But now we know Dr. Wankman was a very direct informer, the Stasi, and he established this contact, and there was a very famous dissident, it's called Robert Habermann. I don't know if you know the name. He was a father in the government in this journey, and later he was against it. And he has a saved lung disease. And so Dr. Wankman was his private doctor. And his private doctor was always taking all information from this dissident and give it to the Stasi. And this running of this Habermann, Robert Habermann, is done in the GDR. The Stasi don't know why maybe, but don't know how, and don't know where brain is. And then this Dr. Wankman, my friend Herbert, like John Pearson always did, he asked John, maybe you can find out and understand this. My role at Habermann, we'd like to know where his son is. And so John said, oh, I knew that I go around, and he was always going around in GDR, in Western Berlin, and find out, and he still find out the address of the son, and the Sutherland, David to his son, Herbert Wankman, and he directly goes to the Sutherland. That means the Stasi used Mennonite pastor John Thiessen as a so-called blind informant. That means the friend Herbert gives the order to John Thiessen. He doesn't know where it comes from. He thought it was available for a bunny. And this was a blind informant. He was blind physically back to the sound. Yeah, just kidding about that. The last chapter, how many times I am, we're good, 5 minutes more, 5 more minutes. The next chapter is our Stasi pastor, I call him. It's really not a wide name. Maybe I should say something else. But I because the focus today is this, maybe if I have another focus, it's just one part of his story. On the left hand, we have a pastor, also a bookseller, a pastor, and the Stasi, you look at it's Gerhard Bassarak. We have this picture from the Stasi archives, and every time I get a picture, they color it. I don't know, I can use it as a, that's why I got it like this. Always you got this archive materials, but also the names are looking after for the black seal or everything, so that you have to hide the personality of the people. But in general, it's a difference if you are a victim, then you don't get information. But if you are a perpetrator, then it's another heuristic law situation. We can talk about more about it because they said the victims ought to know who were the rapists. So this Gerhard Bassarak, he has a young son, and well, this was 80-year-old, in 1980, Bernhard Jansen wants to retire. He was 78 years old. He was not well enough. He was sick. And so he wants to go to the west together with his wife Bernhard. They want to go to the west to a lodger who was living in Salzgitter at the western. And so he said, I retire. I don't want to be responsible anymore for my Mennonites in the GUR. We have to finally ask them. And so this Gerhard Bassarak, they knew the Mennonite. He always had some deferments and some contacts and invited them to some holidays in summertime where he has a league on kind of retreat. And so the Mennonites come there and so they have contact. And I actually put it in the months, and he helped the Mennonites to find a pastor. And you should know in 1969, this is affair from Wall Street to get in contact with Knut Hansen. Knut Hansen was at that time a young 18-year-old boy. He was serving in the National Army at that time. And he got in contact with them. And so this guy from Bassarak told to the Stasi, I have an interesting young man here. And the Stasi said, oh, maybe we can build him out or building in the church to us. And so that's what I know. They sent him to study theology. Maybe he was ultimate not on that, but this Gerhard Bassarak, he was also a theologian, and maybe he said, oh, that's good. Maybe you should study theology. And so Knut Hansen studied theology, and at the end he wrote his master about the Mennonites. And so he in 1978. And so he came to the Mennonites, and asked them about the Mennonites, and meant about the Jansen and then also other people. And the lowest contact person was Thiessen. She was a contact leader, and she was also a part of the board of the Mennonites, and so the contact was there. And then we have two documents that the Stasi said, yes, it's good. We go to the Mennonites, we allow, or we appreciate it to do that. Before that, they said, we just want to prepare somebody to work in a Lutheran evangelical church, not especially by the Mennonites. But then this opportunity was all open, and so we came to the Mennonites. And this is in Hansen. I got in the ancient in Denmark, and from the various used. And more specifically, from 1980 to 1919, he was a pastor of the Mennonites in Puidoux land. And this is what the Stasi wrote about him. Now, my friend one. I am Paul. That was his Roman name was Paul.
Paul traveled to the Soviet Union for the first time after his appointment to a church leadership position in the Mennonites. The Western headquarters of the Mennonites, which the reporters in the Mennonite Committee, immediately reacted to this and gave him specific orders. In the implementation of these orders, he came into contact with politically operational relevant circles among Soviet Baptists. During his assignment, he established a good contact with representatives of the Mennonites in Canada.
And if you see here, this is the Canadian flag with this you can imagine maple leaf. He was in 1983, he was in Vancouver. The student Hansi, there was many Hansi leading in Vancouver, and he was sent in a GER to go, and they were, and I think that means maybe in John Thiessen, because they John Downing came from Canada, and they were in Berlin, and he has the contact to Canada, and so he went to Canada, and I read that he has, Knut Hansen has a cousin. But he was married to a Mennonite in Canada. There was also the kind of connection on this day. But this is just the point. We don't mind what they're talking by that. But the good concept is the Canada. I don't know these. One special thing is that this Knut Hansen, you just read it, had his order was we find out how the literature smuggling is going from the West, from the mission organizations in Soviet Union. In the background, the Stasi worked together with an KGB, with a secret service from US, in Soviet Union. And they had a paper, and they said, we have to find out how this smuggling is going. This was first the Gerhard Bassarak, this was his main thing, and now in Heisman, I like to find on the Mennonite side, this mountain. And this was the job. And luckily, we just know what how to do in 2001 and go in the buildings mountain. On the other side, Hansen has a lot of surveys than he was in the castle. And this villages were also virtually Mennonites in the GDR. First, he has the permanent reason and multiverse. We always talk about the best of building the socialism. That means he is in traveling and algorithm. Then it was possible to get the telephone for the radio communication, and that time we got. And when it goes along, in Hansen, they do have a telephone. It was not very easy to get a telephone. But on the other side, the Stasi want to know what he's talking about on the telephone, and they were really do it to the have a telephone. And the next point is, Hansen told in an interview we have, that it was just a phone call for him to somewhere, he didn't tell where, that the young man don't have to go to the young. I don't know if it really was here. I don't know if there were some people going to the one that you might please tell, and some soldiers starting to behind you or not. But times he said, we had the possibility, and we were such a small group that they don't want to follow the Mennonites because of Yanni, and so we say, the telephone call was none. And then we have what was the possibility in Schweder Straße, that was the house where the Mennonites names at the house of Jansis, and there was a lab with a private lab, and if you do with Hansi, they possible that it was changed. The news was changed, and so that it could become a meeting place for the Mennonites, not more of lab because they have a lot of problem with the old people in that time, or the place to work. But there wasn't a lot of municipal contacts, and so they can change the image of this spot as a meeting place for the Mennonites. And it was actually referring because of the I showed you this picture. It was the World Council in World Conference and when Mennonite was organized before. There's the whole board, 6 persons from the East can travel there. And they all have this kind of diplomatism that is that it was not controlled at the border. And 2 times made it possible that this group can go. And they were really amazed about that. Crazy that we can go in the West. Even a woman called Barbara Sturz, David Schurz, that I don't have a family, I don't have a house, I don't have a car, and I can go. If nobody in this situation can go, because they always say your husband, the wife has to stay here, only has a house if he will come back or so, and he has nothing and went there. So it was this is the situation. A lot of privileges and also something in the back. What does it mean for the Mennonites in the GDR? First, they try to do the Mennonites, you go into the hell, then you come here and see brothers and see in southern countries in the West, and especially in the Northern American part. And this was a very big thing for the government. They want to explode it, they have a problem with that, they want to underground things around that, and they're the way to try to do them. But the second point is the peace thing. Peace and the fear of the New World War for Mennonites and others together. That means the fear of the Third World War. In Germany, it's now even way bigger than a few years ago. The fear the next war. And so we have this situation in the 1950s and 60s. And so the people who wants to get in contact, building bridges, they try to do it. And so the secret services try to control this meetings. This was the situation in the 60s. And in the Vietnam War, Mennonite wants to get in contact with the Andes about the help. And this is what, when I talk to people and said, didn't you know that the secret services are always in the back of you? Paul Peachy, Reggie Spinibus, and all the other Mennonites from NCC, they said, yes, we know that. But we had to wait for this, and then what we can do. What we think that alternative is? Shall we do nothing, or shall we be like a tyrannical Christ ruins this and all the enemies and we have to fight against them? No, we are Mennonites. We want evil witches and we alias people talk to wrong people. But maybe this is their fault more than our problem. So we have to end. And the last thing is Mennonites had privileges in the past, but it has all costs. The peace witness at that time was very controlled. It's not so really born in the peace movement. We have the push in peace movement in the 1980s, but brings the peaceful revolution and not the Mennonites who have been that part, because I think the pastor was there always staying and praying. Most known doesn't defend them. And we don't know exactly what the Russian Christian betrays and this person. I'm just being in contact, trying to find out. We don't know exactly for what the costs from this. Yeah, that's my project. By learning, I'm not really with the public. For the website, we would like you to follow me. It's generally sometimes I will even be in a music and say, then you can go from there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's fascinating. And you'll take questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. We have one microphone today. So either speak loudly and then I will repeat, or I'll run the mic out and I'll run the mic back. Any questions or comments?
No, I'm really comments. Compared to 1965, 66, on White and Iron, Lithium, Berlin. And we had an assignment with MCC. My assignment was to make contacts in East Berlin. And I went to see Dr. Lemon. In that time, January 1965, I got his name. John Howard Yoder let me, and so I should contact Dr. Belford. Dr. Bells. He was charged as the evangelical church. So he's the one I got the name, but I wonder why his role might be in all of this. John Howard Yoder gave you the name of Mr. Mason on that trail in 1965. He showed the picture. One of those persons on that trip was my friend Leroy Walbert. We had them students of the seminary together. And part of what had happened there was students had raised money already then to see that it got to North Vietnam to meet the needs of people who were suffering from the war there. So that started already in the old first. They filmed that in 1965. So this is a little more background. So I didn't know really the contact. I got a lot of information. I got a lot of time again. But big packing material, some of which I still have. And he wanted me to take it out to the West, get it published. He found some worsened pictures of children that could show them for U.S. mom, he said. And I took her to an LCC meeting in Belgium. And Peter Dick saw that and said, "You're being used." But anyway, that's just a little background. I wondered if Peter run into any on how that name, Dr. Wan, has got into the I really now I remember that I wrote your name in contact with Dr. Landman. And somebody doing free yeah, that's then we can have an interview that next day. I am focusing that because how did it start on came to the Mennonites? Because there was a little conference after the big conference in Amsterdam. There was a little conference in East Berlin, and this Dr. Batman had a slideshow. about northern Vietnam and all this destruction. And you know about that? I heard that. But Leroy Walters and I were around that presentation that he did. That's the one you're talking about. It was in about February 1966, somewhere around in there. This I'm talking about was in August 1967. Okay, well, we saw many of August. Okay, no. Maybe there was a thing for the presentation where he came in for Lynn about the same time a year ago.
Did you hear that in the back?
We emailed with each other for an article in Mennonite World Review, and Tim Huber, meet you in person. What do we know about Constantine after 1990? Did he disappear? Is he still alive today? Did anybody know anything about him after 1990?
Yeah, great question. He was on the Lutheran Church, and he was just they set him free for 5 years to go to the Mennonites, and then they set him free for another 5 years to stay with the Mennonites, and then ended in April 1919. And in May 1992, he goes back to the Lutheran Church in Köpenick, Köpenick, and he stayed there as a pastor. And there is the Lutheran Church in Berlin and around the Brandenburg, they don't have this null check like the others had. Everybody with the Stasi have an null and saying they check nullity, they check this. And in this church, they said, we let them free. If you want to be checked, then yes, and if you don't want to be checked, then it's okay. This was a big problem for the people out there. Why don't you go and let him check? If he has a white conscious, then he can go. Hansen didn't go, and so it was not official that he was working with the Stasi. And he works as a pastor for 19 years. And I had a colleague on him. He died, passed away in 2019. I just was here and just find out in the more on this background. And so I said, oh, when I come back, I'll already go to him and ask him what was going on. But then he passed away. So I had an interview in 1992 where he's talking about all these things, but never said that he was a Stasi. He said, oh, we did some here. We got the things in the 1970s within Bible, still the Russians, and so it was like a adventure story, but one as a part of a Stasi program. And so I maybe, yeah, we can say it. He was a gay. He was a homosexual, and he lived together with a man. And in a time where the Christians have a problem with that, and so the Stasi has maybe a possibility to put him under pressure and say, if you don't work with us, then do their job. And so this was all the time the Stasi they tried to find out weak points in the life of the other person, and then go in and say, you have to go first. And so it could be a very important thing. But later it was not more problem in the real churches. And so he married officially a man later. And I had contact to him, and this man said to me, is not allowed to say this because it's not true what you say, we don't have any thing. And that man told me, hang on, we didn't tell this old man next door to him about his death, about his mouth. And it's still, we have the documents, all, and it was written first time, I know, from 1999. And then it was still 80 times. And there was work about this, all these things. And never said stories I've been working for Stasi. This is never a point to the end of his life. And so I have this show, and we go in this congregation in August, maybe, or September. And I'm really very, I'm not really for so I want to talk to the people we met and we know. One is this it's not our thing to judge about that. This is not my aim. But I think the victims should know what is going on, and he is mainly and to go to his own God and tell what is going on. Maybe we really just know a little bit of this story. Yes, other question. Did it drink it?
Well, I'm sure you'll stick around if people want to talk to you individually.
Yes.
Yes, great. So Bernhard will be here and Jim's Charlie will be outside. So, and the exhibit is on here and then in the next room and around the walls. So feel free to stay and look at the exhibit and ask questions if you have them. So one question way in back, do you want to just yell? What is pictures outside? Oh, tell us about the pictures outside with the German.
I don't know that we have such a nice eye catcher from Germany here. So I probably have to put something outside that can see if there is something inside, then you should go there. But this is why I put this picture. These are just information that's interesting people who are in contact with the GDR. And I just interviewed them. And in my book, there are the long interviews, and I just have one short sentence of them in this. Make just one sentence. There is also this now 13,000. And he will in 1985. We go to the sentence is in German outside, and I try to remember it. He said, if the people know all about us, they maybe don't want to contact us anymore. But God knows everything, and he loves us. And if you know his story, then you think what that means from their side. Interesting that the godly given maybe. And these are just some short sentences from these interviews, just to be and I can see.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming, and you're welcome to come back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And also want to thank you, Mark Jansen, who facilitated the whole arrangements here, the contact we have with them.
I got a few of my hosts, and I think I will give it to Rob and John Thiessen of the library. If you want to read, I maybe I did two to you, then one thing for reading, and so. Because it was too heavy to bring the things here. And so if you are interested, you can go there. And the other thing is we will put away the exhibition after we let you just have a last look, because, tomorrow is another exhibition, and on Monday I will pack my thing, and on Tuesday I will go to Edgar and Ocean and Angel to Hausenberg, and nice meeting you. I'm very thankful for the